So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Janice Mcdonald. I'm an educator at Rutgers University, an associate professor in the Department of 4-H Youth Development, where I serve as the STEM agent in the department. We're part of our Rutgers Cooperative Extension Program. I've been working at Rutgers for a number of years. I was hired in 1994 to work at the Department of Marine and Coastal Sciences to help 30 or so plus faculty with their broader impacts with NSF. So I've been doing that for quite some time. Thanks to our director, we developed a pretty strong culture in our department of really looking at broader impacts. So much so that in the early days, the NSF directors would come, program officers would come to Marine and Coastal Sciences and discuss that with myself and our director and many of our faculty. So we had a nice opportunity and window to really work with NSF and thinking through what broader impacts were. So if you're interested, I can drop in the chat box a link to our program at Marine and Coastal Sciences at Rutgers, and you can check that out, or the range of things that we offer. And if you're interested in future work in kind of this idea of broader impact identity, or looking at this over the long haul, right? Looking at broader impacts in terms of a career trajectory. That's a term we use a lot in the ARIS community. You can certainly go to our site, Research and Society, and check out some more of our offerings in that. So that's who I am. I wanted to give an opportunity for Jory and Megan, which are the other folks involved in the training team, to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So Jory, do you want to go next?
Sure. Probably a lot of you already heard me introduce myself in the previous session, but I'm Jory Weintraub. I am part of the ARIS training team and ARIS leadership team. And my other job is I'm a faculty member at Duke University, where I teach science communication, and I run a broader impact support office for Duke folks. And that's it.
And I'm Megan Heitman. I'm based at Iowa State University. I'm a part of what we call a grants hub, which is basically a research development office for the university, doing BI consultations and trainings. And a good portion of my time is committed to ARIS for training purposes and resource development and those types of things. So that's me. Great,
thank you both. And I see our, just a quick note here, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. A big part of what we do with the ARIS Summit is make sure we have time to network. So this, in a virtual mode, that's one way we can do that, right? I see our fearless leader is also with us, Susan, so welcome, and Diane. A lot of the members of the ARIS team are here, so that's great to see. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the Arris Toolkit and why we have it. Most of you are really familiar with ARIS at this point, and the fact that we're focused on developing and supporting a community of BI professionals to improve the impact of research in society. We all have an interest in that, or we wouldn't be here, right? So, but you may not be familiar with the idea of our toolkit. And what do we mean by a toolkit? What I think we mean is a suite of digital documents and interactive web tools that allow us to really focus on improving the broader impact outcomes and impacts for researchers and their collaborating partners. These tools can be used by three kind of key audiences, if you will. Researchers who are proposing to NSF is an obvious, and of course us as BI professionals who assist researchers in this work, and any other partners who participate in BI work with university researchers. So that's who these tools are sort of geared to. So why have a toolkit? We really want to focus on this part of it. Is we hope to use this as an evidence-based toolkit to facilitate a community of practice. Really, that's the main goal. The toolkit will be focused on including strategies for our broader impact implementation, practitioner training, and quality assessment materials. To be effective, we want the toolkit to have provide a high quality of evidence to guide their use and their implementation. So we're very focused on this and hoping that this will lead to developing professional competencies and eventually certification programs that we can offer through our ARIS Center. Okay, so here's what I was hoping we would accomplish today with all of you. I'm going to spend probably the bulk of the time giving you the grand tour of our Broader Impact Wizard 2.0, talk a little bit about who it's for and how it was developed and what kinds of features it has. And then we'll have some time for you to network and figure out how you can use the Broader Impact Wizard yourself to help prepare researchers in your consultation sessions. I find that that's one of the more important parts of these conferences is really getting a chance to network with each other and hoping you'll learn as much from each other as you will from us today. Then maybe we'll take a quick 5-minute bio break and then jump into the last part of our toolkit, which is looking at our checklist and guiding principles document, revisit that, and also give you the preview of our rubric that we've been working hard on as a group. So in order to kind of define the tools of the trade, it's kind of hopeful to define the trade first, right? So I wanted to take a moment just to define what a BI professional is and how we define it in our ARIS Center. So we really define this as a knowledge broker, partnership coordinator, capacity builder, has a variety of terms that can support and direct participation in research, education, communication, and community engagement between the academic and other diverse stakeholders such as K-12 and informal educators, industry, and society at large. That's a lot, right? So I really have just started working on this diagram, and I'd be very interested in your feedback on it. I'm going to give you some time to actually do that in a few minutes. But this is sort of recognizing that not all of us are the same. The definition in and of itself kind of implies that, but we really want to think about our profession as a continuum with what we call administrators and practitioners, perhaps at the two ends of the spectrum. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this with Megan as we work on a handbook for BI collaboration with the University of Michigan, between ARIS and the University of Michigan. And I put together this infographic in an effort to help us kind of capture the different flavors and forms that BI professionals come in. So I want to try this on you. Practitioners, we think, sometimes identify as the developers of tools and resources necessary to successfully achieve societal significant broader impacts. And they connect researchers and community partners to both develop BI plans and implement them. Practitioners can be located within a university department or administrative office and support researchers with both pre and post award requirements related to broader impacts. At the other end of the spectrum or continuum is sort of the BI administrator, who supports researchers in the development of plans for inclusion in their NSF awards. Administrators are often focused on linking researchers to appropriate partners on campus to support their broader impacts goals, and often have very vast databases, or Rolodexes is the old term if I'm dating myself, where they can sort of play a matchmaker and link up appropriate partners to different BI researchers interested in BI plans. Their efforts are most often focused on the pre-award phase and the research faculty development part of all of this. So you can see in this little graphic, we're trying to represent that in a way that hopefully makes sense and gives us, acknowledges that we're not all the same and that we're coming at this idea of broader impacts from different angles. So I want to just take a minute and give you a chance to sort of think about what, do you consider yourself a BI administrator or a practitioner, or is there a better description for what you do? Is this model helpful, or is it missing something? I would love to hear if you see yourself in this or not. I'm going to, in a minute, once you have a chance to think about that, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to switch to Menti in an effort to try to capture all of our input on this. So just hang on and bear with me for a second while I attempt to switch over here to this. Let's see if I can get my computer to cooperate. Okay. It's not helping. Okay. Hang on one second. Okay. Something's not working correctly, of course. Menti, I was just in the Impacts Canada session and they were having trouble with Menti. Maybe it's the Menti thing and not us. Hang on a second while I try to share this screen. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Let's see if we can get this to work. All these boxes are covering up the present button. There we go. All right, so the way, if you've used Menti before, which I think many of us have, the way this works is you go to menti.com and you put in that code at the top. And I'm just really curious to know how many of you identify as more of a practitioner or administrator, or neither of those terms make sense to you at all and you prefer a different term. Just put that in something completely different bin. Couple practitioners. I definitely consider myself a practitioner because I work both pre and post award, but I know Megan definitely identifies more as an administrator, as someone, and Jory as well, who works on the pre-award side, does all the matchmaking. Let's give you another minute to figure out Menti. It seems to be working now. Oh, we're getting a lot of people saying something completely different. So I'm super interested in what you have to say. So if you're comfortable unmuting and would like to say something, feel free to do so. Or if you want to put in the chat what you think is different about those definitions. We're really interested in hearing what you have to say.
Hi, Janice.
Hi.
Okay, let me turn on my video. Yeah, I'm Mary Green. I guess I felt like on your matrix that I'm a research development professional. So I'm working pre-award, but I'm not actively connecting faculty to stakeholders. They have to, I'm helping them understand what best principles are and what goes into a good, like, broader impacts plan for a proposal, but I'm not in the field working with stakeholders. I'm providing guidance to them and critiquing what they come up with. So I didn't feel like I fit in that administrator box that's actively engaging with stakeholders.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that.
I agree. I was going to say, I see myself more as a administrative support person than an administrator itself, because I'm on the back side of it. I'm doing putting things into the website, helping find some tools and referencing people to the tools, but don't necessarily have any impact in how they're writing their proposals or who they're interacting with beyond that.
Yeah. Okay.
Administrator can have lots of different meanings, and I
It
think
sure can.
so. I think I mean, in the broad field of higher education, I'm considered an administrator, but in terms of broader impacts, I'm not administering any programs. I'm not administering any broader impacts programs, and I didn't know if that's what you mean or if you mean something else. So you might want to have a developer. I don't know, some other category.
Yeah, I hear you.
We had a lot of conversation on the word administrator, because I think of, higher level within the university than I am.
Right.
So
yeah, that's another whole thing. Yeah.
we kind of talked about like facilitator or coordinator, because it's basically like what I do, and maybe I think more of what Jory does is again, I don't do any of the programming. I don't help with any of the programming. I don't do anything after it's been really submitted. And sometimes I don't see it when it is submitted, but I do help make those connections, right?
Okay.
I do help with the best practices and also work with some partners to make those connections and at least be aware of what they're doing. Yeah, connector would be a decent, yeah, we kind of struggled. We kind of like practitioner as the doer, but have struggled to categorize the other side
Yes,
with a
we have.
word.
Yeah, so that's why this conversation is very helpful.
Developer would not be,
Developer's a good word.
I think
yeah.
that would work too.
You just, I think if there's a, if the more hands-on thing is separated from the, you know, the best practices and guidance and facilitation and training kind of aspect. I mean, I do trainings on how to do broader impacts. I provide resources to help people understand what broader impacts are and how to do it. I read proposals and critique the plans and tell them what's missing. You know, that they've missed their impact or they don't have a good evaluation plan or refer them back to the resources, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people do that. They don't have the bandwidth. I mean, it's not a dedicated office and there's a lot of people who are not in dedicated broader impacts offices that just, I would love to be able to do more, but it's only a small part of my job. So.
Yeah.
All right, let's try another one. Whoops, I think it skipped ahead. Hold on. This Menti's driving me nuts. Okay, hang on a second. I don't know why it's doing this. I'm so sorry. I feel not quite as bad because the other group was having issues with it too. All right, let's see if this works now. Okay. All right, can you guys see that? So the next one is, please add a word or two to describe you think what your most important contribution to BI planning with PIs is. Just a word or two to talk about that. This will say a lot about what we value about what we do, right? What we think our most important contribution is. Give you another minute to put in some words. Outreach is a big word. Partnerships, I see. Goal setting, I like that. Ethical relationships. Let's see. Broadening horizons, that's a good one. I'm brainstorming buddy. Yeah, I feel like one of those quite often. It's a good one. Broadening horizons, yeah. Listening. A lot of development, a lot of connecting. Resource connector. Okay, these are great. This is so helpful to see. All right, so that's good. Let's see if it'll switch to this one now. So take the other end. Post a comment about what you find most challenging as an aspect of your work. And this will come up as little notes, so you can put a few words to describe a challenge. The most challenging thing about your work. Time, yes, 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 yes. And to be an expert on everything, yes. It's hard to be a jack of all trades for sure. Budget, last minute requests for sure. Yes, unfortunately, PIs still do consider broader impacts as an afterthought a lot. Definitely a problem still. It's getting better, at least in my institution. We've been working on it for 27 years though, so it's a culture development thing. That your work is seen as optional. Yeah, I hear you. I certainly have felt that before. Follow through on proposals. Yeah, that's an interesting one. If you're a practitioner, you know, that's an issue too. I spend a fair amount of my time trying to wrangle back what was funded and get the ducks in a row to get that work actually done. Okay, these are all great. really helpful. Last minute request. Okay, I think, yeah, I got to read capacity. Yes, 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 yes. I hear you. Very nice. Thank you for doing that. That's just really, really helpful. So what I'd like to do now is just give you the sort of this lay of the land, right, of our evolving Arris Toolkit structure. So we have a number of tools that I would consider review tools, right? That's the Arris Guiding Principles document, which is wonderful and has been around for a while now. We have two newer tools, a checklist and a rubric, which I'll describe later. And then we have the wizard, which we're gonna spend some time talking about today. And of course, if you attended BI 101 this morning, you know all about our training opportunities that we've been doing as webinars and workshops that are more of a development level training sessions that are really helpful. And we have to also acknowledge that the fellows, the Arris fellows, are developing all kinds of tools that are about effective practice as well from the community. So this is kind of the evolving structure, if you will, to what we're gonna, eventually have as part of our Arris Toolkit. But like I said, I'm gonna focus on the wizard right now because that one's a little bit more shovel ready than the others in terms of the evolution and how we put them together. So for those of you that are familiar with the broader impact wizard, there was a version 1 before the version 2 that you're going to see today that was funded by another NSF project called COSI, the Centers for Ocean Science Education Excellence. And I was the director of one of the 14 centers. Ours was called Networked Ocean World, or COSI now for short. And this really came out of a bunch of conversations with program officers and my co-director PIs that really wanted, our main gist of our whole center initiative was to foster better partnerships between researchers, ocean science researchers specifically, and the education communities, whether that be informal or formal. So we started in 2006 publishing a guide for scientists with the Oceanography Society. And it was a very hot ticket item. They got rid of so many of them so quickly. So we decided to take that content and try to put it into an interactive form in the wizard format, which we developed. And I will note that in 2018, Susan Reno and I worked with TOS again, the Oceanography Society, to revise and reprise the 2006 document to oceanographers, which has also been very popular and successful. But the wizard's been around. So why do we use the wizard? And I already alluded to this a little bit with this broader impact identity piece that we really care so much about in ARIS. And the whole bottom line is that we'd like researchers to treat BI like they do their intellectual merit. And that engaging the public will not only benefit society, but will also help the researcher grow as a scientist and a communicator, that it's definitely a two-way opportunity. And the wizard really tries to communicate that in a variety of ways. The main gist of it is to support early career researchers in developing their broader impact projects, to expedite facilitation of meetings with researchers. I use this tool for that purpose, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And then have a collection of effective practices in one place, right? One product that you can point to and hopefully help researchers realize. I'll also note that the first wizard had a bunch of case studies that really helped kind of be examples, if you will, for how broader impacts can best be done. And we'll probably have a similar piece in our certification program where we have this kind of case study approach that will really help look at the different investment areas of NSF and show and highlight those that are doing it really well. So there's a couple of assumptions in the design of the new wizard that I want to just make you aware of. First of all, we're still considering this something that primarily for early career researchers, because they're the ones that really need the support and understanding of what broader impacts is all about. And they're also the ones that we can affect the most in terms of their career trajectory, right? And building their broader impact identity. Not to say that an old salt oceanographer or other scientist, STEM professional couldn't benefit from the wizard, but it really does speak to the younger set. And And it acknowledges that everyone, including researchers, are time limited. That came up in our challenges list. So we know that that's an issue, and we've developed multiple ways for them to get into this thing and hopefully get the most benefit for their time investment. We also have to acknowledge that most researchers don't have experiences thinking about broader impacts, especially if they're early in their career. They have no formal training in it. Everything that they get is sort of ad hoc, and we need to develop kind of the equivalent of a BI 101 to help them develop their effective plans that really make sense to them. So I'm going to attempt to play this right now. I really hope it works. Let's see if it works. But this is a little short introduction to the wizard that I hope will help give you some grounding in what it's about. This is hot off the presses. So hang on while this plays.
Welcome to the magic of the Broader Impacts Wizard. This wizard helps you develop a broader impacts plan that will satisfy the National Science Foundation's requirements and fulfill your interest in communicating your research. This site has two converging pathways. First, the Plan Elements section helps you become familiar with the components of a BI project. Second, the BI Wizard is a quick and easy tool which produces an outline of important points to help frame discussions with your BI partners and to frame the broader impact section of your NSF proposal. If you're not familiar with writing broader impact statements, we suggest starting with the Plan Elements portion of the site. In this section, there are questions you can answer to help you think about the elements of your work. You can save your thoughts in the provided text box. This information is saved locally in your web browser and is not shared. If you are familiar with writing BI statements, you can jump to the wizard. The BI Wizard is a series of 4 steps designed to help you draft a well-constructed BI plan. The Plan Elements and the wizard are linked, so notes you take while working through the Plan Elements portion will populate within the wizard, so there's no saving or transferring required. The checklist provides a list of the required elements of a BI statement and questions asked by reviewers. The rubric is a more detailed tool to provide guidance on components of your BI plan requiring modification prior to submitting. The BI Wizard is a helpful tool to organize your thoughts and hopes for your BI activity. We suggest using it iteratively, from meeting preparation with a BI professional or potential partners, to further refinement of the plan, and finally, to check your plan using the rubric and checklist features. Please watch the introduction video to help you get an overview of the important elements of the BI plan. And thank you for using the BI Wizard.
Okay, so as you can see, this isn't quite done yet, but it's meant to sort of outline for users the two major ways in which you can.
Welcome to the magic of the.
Let's see. The two ways in which you can use it effectively, and we're going to go into more details right now. But that will be the first item that you see in the wizard as you come in, just so that you can get a lay of the land of how it can be used. So what I invite you to do right now is to, if you have another browser, you can pop open, is type in the URL address, which is aris.marine.rutgers.edu/wizard. And you can follow along with me as I sort of highlight some of the key elements of the wizard. So there's a couple of things I want you to notice as you go through it, and I'll mention them right now as you're loading up the page. One of the more useful things is this nonlinear BI elements page. Okay, this is really meant to give you that a la carte sort of targeted approach to what element of your plan you want to work on, and maybe even receive some cursory training on with some videos and tutorials that have built in. So that's sort of the nonlinear part. As I mentioned, there are video tutorials built in throughout it. And there's also examples, broader impact examples built in to offer additional guidance, sort of the idea of a, kind of teach one, do one model. Here's one right next to you. Now you try with this fillable fields and notes section right next to it. There is a summary page that pulls it all together that we'll look at in a few minutes. And one of the newer things that we've done is related to cost. How much will this cost is always a question that I hear from the researchers that I work with, and certainly an important, kind of consideration in the work that we do. So let's start with, actually, I want to exit out of this, and I want to just show you the intro video. That piece probably gets the most use, if you will. in terms of its usability for the field. So what I'm going to do, it's only 4 minutes. I'm going to play it in, unless let me do this before I play it. How many of you have looked at the intro video before? I don't want to play it if everyone has seen it before. I don't know how many people have. If you can just show of hands or use your little thumbs up thing if you've already seen it. Okay, it's 4 minutes, so a lot of you have not. I'm seeing. Okay, only a couple of you have, unless I'm. All right, yeah. All right, so I think it's worth showing because those of you that have seen it can get a snack or something for the 4 minutes. But I think it's a nice place to start in terms of giving you an introduction to what the tool does. So let's do that. And if you're like me, if you don't do it now, you might not do it, period, right? All right, so let me know if you can hear this. I hope so. Is that good?
Okay, pretend you work here. Your specialty is the Aurelia aurata, or moon jelly. Or maybe it's superconductors, or perhaps black holes, or volcanoes, or whatever it is. Let's just say it's moon jellies. The reason you are an expert is because you spend a lot of time here in the field and here in the lab doing research on moon jellies, trying to answer that question that no one has asked before. But this research costs money, so you go to the NSF. And the NSF wants to know that you are a good investment. They want to know that the money they spend on your research will advance the science and positively impact society. Whether that's educating the public or helping policymakers, why does learning about jellies matter to them? You need to show why it's important for other people to understand your work. The question you need to answer is, what's the broader impact of your research? Now, the Broader Impact Wizard is designed to help you craft a broader impact statement to share your research with others. Let's take a look at some of these ideas you'll need to know when working through this wizard. Let's start with audience. You need to show that you can communicate the importance of your work outside your discipline or the scientific community. This could be anything from youth groups to members of an industry, like fisher people. The audiences that you target will influence how you present your work. What resonates with one group might not resonate with another, so you have to modify your message accordingly. Collaborative partnerships. You can't effectively make a broader impact doing everything yourself, and you shouldn't. There are people out there whose expertise centers around, say, web design, curriculum development, or video production. You'll be far more successful communicating your research if you partner with these people and leverage their expertise. And remember, your broader impact project can be a powerful opportunity to engage communities. Working with local organizations like a school is a great way to spread your research to a wider audience. Statement of uniqueness. Your broader impact statement should aspire to the same level of uniqueness that your research does. It's gotta be new. No one wants to fund research that's already been done. Similarly, you have to find your niche. Leverage what your institution already has to offer, such as partnerships or programs, to create something new. Do something you are comfortable with in a way you like to communicate. The key is to find broader impact approaches that are proven to work and apply them to your research in a new way. You have to get creative. Evaluation plan. You want to know your message is going to resonate with your intended audience. The best way to do that is to conduct evaluation. So even if you've built the Jellies research site, you've partnered with the local aquarium, developed a STEM-rich moon jelly curriculum for K through 12, and you've got a snazzy moon jelly video, if what you're saying isn't resonating with your intended audience, you haven't met the goals of broader impacts. There are professionals, internal and external to your institution, who can help you collect information on whether you have met your project's objectives. And if necessary, they can tweak your message to make sure you're actually making an impact and not wasting resources. And finally, a defensible budget for your broader impact. The first step is to realize that a broader impact program is not an add-on. You should think of it as an integral part of your identity as a scholar in both research and broader impacts. Second, be realistic. Working with people costs money. Everyone needs to be paid fairly for what they do. Supplies cost money, travel, overhead. Everything should be included in a realistic budget. So in the end, know that you have to spend money. A budget that is well thought out and covers all your bases gets you one step closer to locking in funding. Ultimately, if you do it right, the results are worth it. And now, it's your turn. The wizard awaits.
Okay. So people use this intro video in a variety of ways. And it certainly gives you the broad overview of all of the different elements of the wizard itself. I tend to use it a lot as sending it to a researcher before they come and sit in my office for a consultation. Sometimes that doesn't work and they don't have time and they didn't watch it, and then they go and watch it after they come and do our consultation as more of a review. I think it serves in either of those capacities quite well. Or if they're working on their own and asynchronously, which I'm finding more and more researchers are, without even coming in my office for a consultation, especially during the pandemic and COVID, there wasn't much of that, right? So we had a lot of asynchronous conversations via email, and I would direct them to different parts of the wizard to achieve the particular problem or goal that they were working on. So if, just like the intro video said, the kind of a la carte version of this is under plan elements, if you look up here. And I'll just direct your attention to this page, who will I engage? This is sometimes, at least in my experience, one of the first things that a researcher can ask is, who am I gonna work with? And they often have that, as the first thing out of the gates that they want to talk about. So understanding the needs of their audience is really of paramount importance. And the wizard here gives a very broad overview of each of the different target audiences and fun facts about each of these audience types and typical strategies for working with them. It is by no means exhaustive. I just want to underscore that. It's not meant to be the be all end all potential list of audiences that exist out there. So, what it does do is give you, like I said, that high level introduction to what's possible, right? And you can see the different ones that we've selected here. Why is it valuable to work with them, and how? What are some ways in which, again, not exhaustive, ways that you can engage with them? One of the more valuable things that PIs tend to find useful is this link here to the literature connections. So what this is here is just a short collection. This one happens to be a little bit longer because it's the K-12 one, and I happen to know more about that than I do the other audiences. But these are some high-level literature connections that they can either look at or incorporate into the rationale description of why they're doing the broader impact they're doing. And this I think it does two things. One is it grounds them in understanding some of the basics of the audience in which they want to work with. And the other thing it does is give them something to cite, to show their scholarship and their understanding of what they're trying to do, that they're not coming at this completely blind and devoid of knowledge of the audience in which they're trying to engage. So that is, we can check this off. And as you do this, and I'll mention this again later, this does save what you're doing locally just on your browser. It is not saved by ARIS or by my department at Rutgers in any way. It's only saved locally on your browser, and it will show up in your summary page as you go through the wizard. So that's an important consideration that I want to make sure you know. Let's see, did I cover everything? Yes. Okay, so let's take a look at the partners section, which is kind of the other part of this idea of audience, right? Or this idea of who will I engage, I should say. Sometimes you'll see that partners can be the audience, or sometimes they can be representatives of people that will help you connect with an ultimate end audience. So it really can vary in terms of what we exactly mean by partnerships. So the intended beneficiaries of the BI activity. In some ways, you want to work with existing relationships in your university or college. And sometimes you might want to seek a new partner, a local community organization or nonprofit, to achieve a specific goal. So one of the more useful things on this page is this little tutorial video from a colleague of mine that we worked a lot with in the COSI days, Dr. Gordon Kingsley, who has studied partnerships, particularly for NSF for many, many years. And I'm just going to play for you the first first 2 minutes of this, where he kind of outlines sort of the metrics, if you will, of what's important about partnerships to consider. And it's just a little short blurb. I won't play the whole thing for you. Hopefully it'll be a teaser for you to go back and listen to the whole thing. So let's see if we can make this work.
When we think about partnerships, and particularly about STEM education partnerships, one of the things that we have observed over numerous evaluations over the years is that partnerships have a variety of different starting points. And one of the ways we've developed to try to explain these starting points is to use a marriage metaphor. We've developed this idea just as a way to help folks understand that your partnership may begin in a wide variety of different spaces. Now, your starting point doesn't necessarily predict whether your partnership will be a success or a failure, but it does give us a good understanding of the types of transaction costs and experiences that you're going to have along the way in trying to establish a successful STEM education partnership. One of the things that I would like for us to think through is first, just what are partnerships? So oftentimes, the idea of partnership got a lot of association with mom and apple pie. What could be more positive than the idea of a partnership? However, the formation of partnerships is difficult, and it requires people to have a deep understanding of the ways in which they need to work between the varieties of cooperation and collaboration they're going to experience. And there's really three key ideas that distinguish a partnership from just any other form of contractual relationship. The first is that the partnership will have some mutuality in exchange. And that means that each of the partners has some vested interest in each other. They rely upon each other. There's something of value that's going to be given back and forth across the relationship. Oftentimes we find when we go into a STEM education partnership, particularly when there's a university and K-12 schools involved in it, that idea has not been thought through very carefully. And in fact, oftentimes there's a notion that the K-12 schools will get something, a benefit from the university, but the university doesn't think carefully enough about the benefits that could accrue to them from the K-12 schools. A second is that the individual partners have to get something out of it. They have to have some enhancement of themselves as a standalone identity of the partner. And so that idea also is not thought through. People will think through, this is a partnership. I loved being associated with these folks, but they don't necessarily think about, well, how do I personally benefit from this particular thing? And then the last is that partnerships are collaborative processes. That means there's a level of engagement that is a bit more than just a handshake contractual agreement. This is something where you expect to have interaction with each other over the lifetime of the partnership. That doesn't mean that the methods and modes of the interactions are going to stay the same throughout the life of the partnership. In fact, it'll probably change as the partnership matures and the activities develop. So,
okay. I'm going to cut it off there. And invite you to watch the rest of it. Basically, what he does moving forward is go through a variety of different metaphors for how different partnerships can evolve. And it's a useful tool, I think, to talk about this with your researchers, because one of the key things I think they need to realize is that there does have to be mutuality in working on broader impacts, that it isn't a linear process where whoever they engage with is just helping them achieve their broader impact. It really has to be a two-way street. And there has to be understanding about what each partner is investing in each other. And by going through these metaphors, you can really get a feel for how, not only how things can go wrong, but also how you can strive to put in those effective practices that make sure your partnerships do go well, and that you're considering the needs of your partner effectively. The enhancement piece is really important. There has to be a mutual benefit to both. And you have to have an understanding about the levels of engagement and what everybody is committing to. So this video really helps sort of solidify those ideas and hopefully convince a researcher that those are important considerations. There's also sort of clarification in terms of what type of partnership, what's the purpose of the partnership that you're trying to create? Is it strategic? Is it more learning? Are you trying to learn something from each other? Or is it more transformational? So this is kind of content knowledge that will help them sort of think through what they really want out of the partnership that they're trying to engage in. And then I usually add a little bit of additional information about, what are you going to do in terms of, the nuances of, are you coordinating, are you cooperating, or are you collaborating with these partners, and at what level? Those words all mean different things, and understanding that is really, really important in establishing these relationships or these partnerships. So the next part of this page really kind of zeroes in on some tips for in your proposal, what you should do with that information. And then, as I mentioned before, this is the interactive part of it, where they can, after consuming that information, can then go ahead and start typing in, some notes, in this section right here, to be able to capture their ideas as they're sort of going through this information. And then on this side, there's also kind of a sample bare bones statement that helps, sort of frame some of these ideas. And this is just a way for them to sort of see some of that in action, some of those notes starting to evolve. So these two pages, I think this partners and audience page are sort of foundational, right? About who you will engage and what, what's the best thing to do to kind of think through the needs of those different partners and audience and target audience members, which again, sometimes are the same and sometimes aren't. So recognizing those differences is really important. Is there any questions so far? I know Megan and Jory are monitoring the chat, but I can't see the chat. So if there's anything, feel free to unmute if there's something you'd like to say or reaction to this so far before we plow ahead. Any comments or questions? I will say too that ARIS does have a partnership unit, professional development training module around partnerships that goes and dives deeper into this, that Jory and Megan and I have been working on. Okay, so that's covered fillable fields. So let's tackle next this, how much will this cost? This is kind of fun. This is a newer addition to the wizard, and it comes from the idea that PIs really don't have a good feel for what these kinds of things should cost. These kinds of things that they typically think of when they think of broader impacts. They all have big dreams about what they want to do, but we want to sort of ground their ideas about what things cost in some kind of basic way, right? So some of you may have been fans. When I was a kid, I was a big fan of the Price is Right game, and one of the TV shows, and one of the big things that they had was higher or lower, right? Which was always fun to play. So this is a higher or lower game that helps a researcher think about and practice developing a budget. And what it does is it has 3 examples of commonly conceived BI activities. And it provides some basic information along with the price. And then you as the researcher can select whether you think the bid is higher or lower based on your thoughts. And again, none of these things are all encompassing, but they are meant to generate discussion and give a framing for some of these ideas, right? So if we just maybe play with the first one. So here's just a little slider here. So you can throw in the chat what you think it is, but the first example is a professional video. A lot of the researchers I work with always want a professional video of some sort. And a number of years ago, we started a video series called The Tools of Science with one of my frequent customers, Dr. Kay Beidel, he's a biologist, a biological oceanographer. And he really wanted to focus on sort of not his science specifically, but his science in the context of what we call the science practices. A number of years ago, the next generation science standards came out, and there was a lot of talk about, what the three-dimensional learning really meant, and what is this thing about science practices and how does that work? So he wanted to contribute to that conversation. So we focused on the science practices, and this is one of his videos called Testable Questions. You can access these all on YouTube, by the way, and there are 7 of them that he's developed over time to really think about his own broader impact identity. And so this Testable Questions one was really focused on the curiosity of researchers and how and why do they ask the questions that they do. So he developed this video. It's about 7 minutes and 40 seconds in length. It has graphics and interviews of scientists talking about their work in the context of teaching. What is a testable scientific question? So here's a reasonable cost. If I were to do the same description I just gave you in a conversation with a PI, what would you say? Would they think it was higher or lower for $3,400? And again, this is a professional company producing it, not your university. And just throw it in the chat, whatever you think it might be. I can't really see the chat, so what are people saying, Megan?
They're pretty much all saying higher.
Everybody's going higher.
Everybody's going higher. Okay.
I'm going to say lower just to be different, but I agree with all of them.
Okay. All right. Well, if the majority is going higher, I'm going to say higher, and you would all be correct. And it gives you a little score. So this video and its companion was about 30,000. So definitely higher. And in terms of budgeting this, and again, this is representative. You don't have to spend $30,000 on a video, but here are some of the items that you would budget for in terms of creating a video for a broader impact. You need to hire somebody to do it and select a partner. You need to do some conceptual planning, which often involves an hourly fee. There's usually charges for pre-production and script writing and a development of a shot list. There's the video shoot itself, and they charge you a lot of times by the hour. And if they're coming in, certainly their travel fees and whatnot needs to be covered. And then there's the post-production where they're editing the final video. I'm doing one right now where the scientists didn't like the animation of a glacier, and we had to basically scrap it and start over. And there was an additional $1,000 post-production fee that's been proven to be very challenging. So that post-production cost is definitely something to kind of put in a contingency kind of fee. And then, oftentimes I put this, if we're working in NSF and we're working with an outside videographer, as a fee for service in the fee for service category. And that does not include the overhead that we probably need to be piled on to that. So, but again, this is representative. I also just did a video for a PI locally within our school, and it cost on the order of I think it was $4,000. But those same budget items applied, right? We still had to budget those same items, in the description of the fee for service as to what it was covering. So that's sort of the idea. There's 2 additional examples. Maybe we'll just do one more really quick. I hear this one all the time, and maybe you guys do as well. But I'd love to develop a museum exhibit, and part of me wants to roll my eyes, but I don't, of course. But that's a very popular one that I hear a lot. And so I did do an exhibit once with one PI that we had in ecology, and he did a beautiful job with this. This was done at a local seaport nonprofit, it was called the Tuckerton Seaport Museum. And they had about 2,400 square feet of exhibit space. And they wanted to do, kind of graphics and video interviews with scientists talking about their work in the estuary. We wanted to work with a company called Lehrman and Kehrman. And it really was a wonderfully conceptualized product. I mean, they really had a lot to say, a lot of contributions about what the research was going on in the estuary, through the seaport thing. So the target price for our game is $50,000. So how many of you think it's higher or lower? Megan or Jory, let me know what people what the consensus is, and we'll put it in.
It's looking like higher again so far.
It does look like higher. Ooh.
Higher, you think? All right, let's
There's
see.
a couple lowers though. This one's a little bit less consensus.
Little less consensus. Okay,
Yeah.
well, we said higher. This one's kind of a trick question in many ways, because this really depends on where you're doing it. In this particular seaport, it was $500 a square foot, roughly. It took a lot of time. So you're not going to do this on a 3-year, research grant, this particular project. Again, you have to really pay attention to your timeline, because exhibits take a long time to develop. And you have to be very involved with your ISE partner, your informal science education partner. In this case, it really bumps to a sub-award level, because that partner has to be so strongly involved, and it's not just a fee-for-service situation where they're going to be intellectually involved in developing this exhibit and partnering with you in a very different way than you would in the last example, right? So a lot of work to be done determining the target audience and story in the partnerships, the storyline, the exhibit designer and graphic artist has to be hired, and the technology integration can be very expensive. So, these are two. There's one more example. We'll probably add more examples over time. But again, the reason for these are to kind of give a framing or a sort of baseline for PIs or researchers to sort of get a feel for what's out there, what their limitations might be, the framework or boundary conditions under which they can work on some of these big ideas. So the page follows the same format where you have the tips for developing a strong budget here in your proposal. And then again, at the bottom of the page, places to take notes and that example on the side there. So that, all the pages follow that same kind of framework. The next page in the a la carte portion of this is how is my research relevant to society? And this just follows the NSF examples of BI investment areas. If you mouse over these, it gives you just a little bit more information. This is right off of the NSF website, just rebroadcast it here for convenience, but it goes over all of the different investment areas and gives you that example just to help with that framing. I think the important thing to remember here is that you want to target one of these investment areas that have been deemed important by NSF. But what you don't want to do is make the PI feel like they have to do all of them. They certainly shouldn't do all of them by any stretch of the imagination. They should focus on something that has value and meaning to them, that's personal and relatable to them in a way that makes sense. And really figuring out the best way that they would like to share their science and communicate what they're doing. So again, same notion down here. They have the example and the fillable fields, and then there's a little blurb here just as an important kind of understanding, or sort of framework back to the idea that to really have a positive impact on society, you really need to think about this as a long haul thing and not a series of one-offs, right? That it's always best if you can build your broader impact identity over time. And just like you think about your research goals, you should think about your broader impact identity in the same way. And this is just meant to be a food for thought kind of, don't forget, this isn't a one-off type of thing. And then there's examples here, one that our case studies where folks who have done that can be highlighted, as well as one of our ARIS favorite highlights, who is Nalini, who's just a wonderful example of someone who knows how to do that and do that well. So those are additional examples to help with that.
Janice,
And then, Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a question in chat that I thought.
Sure,
I could
yeah.
address, from Amy Jo Clemens, who asks, is it better to try to reach a bunch of people or fewer people with more deeper understanding?
You know, that's a really good question, and one that is very personal to the PI. So I'll direct you back to this. In this little video right here, this has a really nice discussion of that, Amy, that goes over sort of the scale and the depth and the scale of working with different audiences. So, you know, you can certainly ask your PI to take a look at that and make some choices, because it's trade-offs, right? There's pros and cons. If you're going with a large scale audience, you're typically going to have less in-depth content, ability to communicate, you know, your content in less depth. But if you're going with a smaller audience, you can go dive deeper, you know, so it's really the trade-offs that you have opportunity for, but also, you know, that you value more as a PI. So it's really a value decision. One is not better than the other, I would say. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that, but that's just my take on it. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what I usually answer in that, when I get that question, my answer is usually what you said. There's not one that's better than the other, but it's really about how the rationale you provide. We talked about this in BI 101 this morning. So whichever you choose to do, whether it's, you know, inch deep and mile wide or the opposite, as long as you give a solid rationale in the narrative of your proposal for why you're choosing to take that approach, that's really what's more important, because ultimately you're writing to an audience of 12 or so, right? The reviewers around the table. And so if you make it clear to them why you're choosing that particular route and it's well justified, I think then it doesn't really matter if it's one or the other.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. All right, hopefully that helps, Amy. One of the last couple sections here that we'll go over is the evaluation. This one often generates a lot of conversation as well, the evaluation section. And normally what I say to PIs here is that, you know, these are public funds and we're accountable for how we spend them. So having some component of your program that acknowledges that is important. And you can, again, attack this in a variety of ways depending on the budget that you have to work with. But that documentation, I think, is really important. Asking yourself, you know, was this project successful and how do I know? And how was it valued by the audience in which it was intended? And was it appropriate for them? And did anything change as a result of doing this BI project on a knowledge, skills, or behavior level? In this section, there's just a lot of broad brush information because this part is there's a lot here. So in terms, a lot of times we hear from PIs that they want to know how to find an evaluator, whether that be internal to their institution or external. Again, this is dependent on the type of project that you're trying to create and how much it costs. These are all very variable things. There is a link right here to our old video from the first wizard that goes over the basics of evaluation, of what a needs assessment is, what a formative evaluation is, what a summative evaluation is. Sometimes that PIs like to know what some of those basics are. This was done by Daniel Shapiro from NPR. So it's a nice little piece. I invite you to take a look at it if that's something you would find helpful. Same kind of structure. You have the example on the left and the place to take notes on the right. And that kind of walks you through. So that kind of gives you all of the a la carte options again, right here. And this is really good for those targeted conversations. If PI comes in and says, I have no idea how to work with, send them to the who will I engage page. Or I'm really struggling with my budget, you know, ask them to review the budget page before they come in. We tend to use this wizard part of it. Again, this is the second part of the tool with audiences that have more experience with broader impact development. So there's a getting started page where, you know, sort of gives you the lay of the land. And then this is just, you know, walking through those steps, giving you the example on the left and then asking and prompting you to draft ideas or notes for your plan on the right here. And this is meant to help a PI sort of not look at a blank page, right? In writing a proposal, that's somehow, to me, the most intimidating part is looking at that blank page. So sometimes just having that those notes filled in, you can see it fills in from other pages. That was the little note I had written in on the other page when we were playing around with it. So it does carry over your notes from the a la carte section or the plan elements part and puts them into this section. So that's really, I think, a nice feature. And then the summary page puts all of it. So there's our cooperative extension mentioned right there. And it tallies this all up, and then you can print that page, and that gives you an opportunity to kind of collect your thoughts, if you will, with everything that you've learned, hopefully, in the use of the wizard. So those are sort of the basics, if you will, of how the broader impact wizard is sort of laid out. What I'd love to do now is sort of take an opportunity to get some of your feedback on this and to talk a little bit in smaller groups about how we would use such a tool, and give you an opportunity to talk to each other about it. So I'm going to put up on the screen some question prompts. Let's see if I can get back to my PowerPoint with my questions, and then we'll go ahead and put you into some groups so that you can meet each other and talk to each other a little bit more about it. We did all this already. Let's see. Get to the right page here. So there are 2 case studies I loaded up into the system. You can or cannot use them. It doesn't really matter. I provided them as a way to give you kind of a shared learning experience with something to talk about, in other words. There are 2 very short paragraph long case studies that can give you an example for your discussion about the wizard. So I'll if you can get into the ARIS Summit page, you'll see them there. If not, I can happily upload them into your breakout room chat box if that's something you want to use. I encourage you to do that because it helps just everybody kind of get on the same page and talk. So the questions I have for you is just how would you envision using it? You can practice sort of playing around with the with the different fields and thinking about it, and using your case study as a way to kind of chat with each other about how you can use this tool effectively in your work. So we can do that for a few minutes and then get back together. And then the last part of our session together, I would love to go over the checklist and the rubric with you and the guiding principles in a little bit more detail, and we can talk about assessment of broader impact plans. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. So Jory or Megan, would you like, I think Megan, you're in charge of divvying us up, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. And let me know if you can't access those case studies. You can just choose one as a group. It doesn't, like I said, there's 2 of them. One of them is Burkhardt, who's one of my favorite scientists from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and he does a lot of like river type ecology work. And then the other one is Tracy Kwan, who's a geochemist, and she does a lot of interesting things and is really interested in undergrad education. You'll see their outline of their wish list, and that might give you some food for thought for how to use the tool. So if you want to do that, and then we can come back together. Hopefully you all had as good a conversation as we did in my breakout room. It was really, really a good one. Hope you all did as well. We don't have just a few minutes left together, so I want to make sure we get to at least giving you a quick rundown of our other tools. Let me skip ahead to where we are. But before we do that, let me just find, here we go. I just want to hear, any Jory or Megan or Susan or anybody who wants to give us a quick rundown on what you guys talked about. Was there anything in the ideas or information in the wizard that came to light that people connected with, or are there any new ideas? We have a couple in our group that would broaden the wizard a little bit and our thinking. any challenges that we still have. We came up with one good one, or any ways that we can apply this in our work. Any kind of quick summaries before we move on to the last bit of our program today?
Well, I wanted to share an observation that came up in our group. It's not a
Great.
summary, but that one of the biggest challenges that some people face is like if you're going into a classroom is like, why would the teacher or the students care? You know, you're passionate about your science, but put yourself in their position. Why would they care about what you want to do? You know, how are you going to make that happen? And that's something that faculty usually can't answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be a component that you could add to the wizard,
Mm-hmm.
is to be a statement, you know, why would they care?
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, the so what factor. That's always an important thing to talk about, for sure. What's important about your work? It can be shared with others. Any other things that came out of your discussions you'd like to share with the larger group?
I can share a couple things that we talked about, just because I know you've used it, Janice, and Susan has used it. But something that came up in our group was everyone else in our group is fairly new to either BI support or BI in general. And we're kind of wondering how to use the wizard as a tool and to introduce it to researchers, right? Like how to use that either in a consultation, do you use it in a training? Because it is so fantastic that it's almost intimidating, Janice. You've created a monster that is too good. So they were a little bit hesitant on how to use it because it is, you know, good and kind of intimidating because it's all encompassing. There's a lot of information there. So I talked to them a little bit about, you know, it can be used in consultations and trainings, but I know you and Susan have used it probably more so than I. So if you guys could talk about that for a little bit, that would be awesome.
Susan, you want to go first?
Sure. We talked about that in our group, about how when you first use it with a researcher, it can seem intimidating because there's so many boxes to fill in, right? We know on the back end of that if you fill in those boxes, the more answers you put in there, the more detailed your summary is going to be at the end, and you'll be able to use that to write the broader impacts. But I think one of the things that's a strength of the wizard, and that was built into this new version, is the modular nature of it, right? So that a researcher can go in and find the parts that they want. When we talked through the case studies, we looked at what particular parts of the wizard would help with some of their problems. And that was easy because we didn't have to start from the beginning and get all the way to the part we needed. We could go right to it. So I think part of it is helping the researcher see how to use the different tools so that it's less intimidating and much easier for them to work with.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you, Susan. That's why we created the program elements page, just so that you could jump immediately to the part where the researcher needed the most help, right? And it could be really served up, you know, not as this linear, you know, sort of thing that you have to go through the whole story, but rather, you know, having the bits, the bite-sized chunks, right, to deal with one problem at a time, so to speak. You're having problems with budget. Okay, let's look at the budget page. You're having problems with finding an audience. Let's look at that page, you know, that sort of thing, to really kind of help break it down and make it less intimidating. So, so the wizard itself, the more linear part of the tool, is really for people who are familiar, you know, with the whole flow of the thing and just maybe want refreshers in each of the project areas, you know, to help them sort of get their thinking and brainstorming going, right? So two very different approaches, non-linear approach and a more linear approach. And that really came out of, you know, talking with Susan and talking with others at the last face-to-face summit we did. If you remember, we had that little table set up and we were taking input from all of you as to how, you know, how best to use it in the ARIS community. So that was one of the key suggestions, was to have a linear and a non-linear, you know, sort of tract, if you will. So that's what we did. And hopefully that helps make it less intimidating. That's certainly the goal. Anything else before we wrap up with our final bits?
Janice, I don't know if this is the right time for this, but Susan Rowe had asked a question right before breakouts.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to respond then because I knew people were going to be going into breakouts and I thought they might miss it. But and Susan, are you still here? I hope you. I hope you. Yeah, there you are.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, so Susan had been asking about resources that ARIS offers specifically for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
And the short answer is that we don't really have a lot yet, although it's something we talk about all the time. We do have an HBCU, Minority Serving Institution, subcommittee within ARIS, and I know a lot of us think a lot about DEI issues, and obviously broadening participation is relevant to this conversation as well. What I will mention is that ARIS has a fellows program, which probably many of you know about, and there's going to be some posters on that as well, where you can do sort of one-year projects and you receive a small amount of funding from ARIS to do this work to develop BI products and resources. And we had a group in the past cohort that developed a large report on this, sort of the state of DEI and broader impacts at minority serving institutions. That's not quite finished and made public yet, but it will be soon. And Susan mentioned that the incoming cohort, there's going to be several other projects that are focusing on that. Do you want to say any more about that, Susan?
So we had one of our projects is working on it this year, and they're just finishing up. So we hope to have that up and running really soon. And then we have a couple projects, particularly because we had a track that had to do with persons with disabilities, but also with BIPOC populations. So there will be a whole lot more coming out soon.
There's also a session Wednesday, I think, specifically on
Resources.
Was it on resource? I was thinking there's a session, I think, on Wednesday on
Fellows, right? Isn't on the fellows resources? No.
There is, but that's not what I was thinking of. I was
Oh, okay.
thinking of one on God, I'm blanking on the term now. Help me out, Susan. Diverse communication, equitable communication. What is?
There's one on inclusive SciComm.
Inclusive SciComm, there you go, thank you.
And then there's another one, sorry, I was just looking it up. So one of them is on building inclusive communities, which is focusing on mentorship. And it also just happens at the same time, the one on inclusive SciComm, they're both at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning. And then of course our keynote is on advancing IDE in the workforce too.
Well, thank you for answering that and for the listing some of that. I've been looking at them and knowledgeable. And I think it was part of our conversation, our small group as well, as we think about the partnership part of the BI wizard, right? So how do we start kind of embedding, integrating some of the thinking in a space for talk about equity, inclusion, and partnerships. An example we talked about is like, for example, one of the Korea faculty I work with wanted to work with refugee organizations, and we help foster the partnership. But what that means to us is that we're bringing in to the grant the partners on campus that can work with us in the curriculum development to do a culturally responsive program, an aspect of practices strategies for trauma-informed STEM education. So it's like, I think the more I see that, the more like focus on that partnership area, because a lot of us don't have the capacity or the expertise to do some of that. So partnerships become even more important, internal and external, to bring into this planning process time. And into the grants themselves, so that we are creating some of those learning experiences for those groups that are authentic and genuine, and kind of help us get ahead into what I wrote in my question, right? The lack of trust in that dynamics that exist between, you know, schools, higher education institutions, and BIPOC communities. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. Great. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. I'll just quickly share with you some of the additional tools in the toolkit, so to speak. I'll remind everybody about the guiding principles document. This is the version 1.0 was developed during the NABI years. And it was a really wonderful tool developed by a group of folks that really helps define some of the key things to consider when developing an effective broader impact. It's been recently updated into a second version that really is designed to help program managers, reviewers, and all of us as BI professionals to really kind of evaluate and assess broader impact plans and think about them as opportunities, to think more broadly or critically about broader impact activities. So this document can be found on the Research and Society page on the ARIS website, and definitely encourage you to go check that out and dive in and take a look at some of that material that's involved in that. And also one thing we haven't talked about a lot, but on the wizard, there is this checklist. You saw it in the mentioned in the little video that is a little toggle list. It has a lot of the same information that the guiding principles document has. It tends to approach it as kind of a either presence or absence kind of thing, a little bit more operational, a little less explanation as to why these things are important, but just as a way to refresh a PI's, sort of understanding of what should be included in their plan and how they might address these really important questions that that are reflective of NSF's investment areas. And then last but not least, we have been working on, ARIS has been working on this rubric. And it's taking that sort of idea of assessment to kind of the next level, which is to help PIs really see where they are in a broader spectrum of fulfilling their target, answering these questions and really thinking through and finding out what does excellent look like as compared to not so great, right? You're headed in the right direction to fair to not very good, right? So try to operationalize it again at a much more instructive level to help PIs kind of zoom in on what they're missing and also provide kind of a reference point. And this is obviously needs additional work, and in working with the ARIS team, as well as our wonderful evaluator, Ellen Altermat, this is something we would really like to, talk to a focus group of some of you who might be willing to help us kind of flesh this out further. So at the end, you're going to have an evaluation. And if you're interested in kind of pursuing this and running some BI plans that we give you through this rubric and really, trying to help see if it works, we really are in need of some folks, some testers that would want to do that. So that's the first question. Let me go back. The first question is, what is the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? And it really kind of walks through this audience kind of target and gives kind of a range of responses of how it might look in a proposal, fleshed out at an excellent to a poor kind of level, right? So that's the one question. The next one is about to what extent does the proposed activity suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? This one is really challenging to quantify because of that word transformative, right? What does that mean? It means different things to different people. So we have this one kind of characteristic of evidence base that we hope will give some insight as to how to judge that criterion. The third question is about carrying out the plan in a well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on a sound rationale. And under that one, there are actually three different kind of items to consider. Are the objectives, sort of smart? Are they measurable? Are they achievable? Kind of looking at it from that angle. Do they hit one of the NSF target outcomes? And what kind of evaluation does the plan provide? So again, on this 5-point scale. And then, the final two questions. This one is about the qualifications of the team or the individual to conduct the activity. And we look at that in terms of the bio sketches, the letters of support, the team itself and their description, what kind of partners they have, and how well they've addressed the partnership needs. So this one has these 4 different items under it. And then the final question is about the resources or the budget through the home organization or through collaborations that allow them to carry it out. And for this, we look at the infrastructure, and we also look at the budget and budget justification. So the plan is for the ARIS team, training team, and Susan and others to offer kind of a focus group session that would allow us to kind of dive in and see, how well this tool really works, and to get some agreement on that based on your input as part of the community. So we are looking for some members to do that in the short term. So if you're interested in that, we will definitely be reaching out to you to do that in the near future. But that's just a little taste or a little teaser of what the rubric will provide in the future. So we're excited about that, and definitely think it'll be a useful tool to help sort of frame our work even more clearly, right? That's always the goal. So Mary's asking, we don't have it out there in the world yet. So if you join our focus group, you will certainly get access to it, because we're still in multiple draft phases of it. So we're trying to get it into a form where we can put it out there in a beta form. One of the things I really want to do, because talk about intimidating. If you look at it on just a sheet, it's sort of overwhelming. And you see, I broke it down in those slides, and it still felt overwhelming. So what I really want to do is create a wizard within the wizard to kind of, sort of make it an electronic version of it that kind of breaks it out even more. So it doesn't feel like, you've got this giant, spreadsheet in front of you that you're trying to apply to a broader impacts plan. So we're working on the accessibility part, and then we'll be working with Ellen to really run those focus groups in the short term. So anything anybody wants to add on that, Susan in particular, or Ellen? Did I cover that well enough? Okay, well, I'm going to put, Ellen, if it's okay with you, I'll put the evaluation in there. Where are you? Are you here? Yes, there you are.
I'm here. Yes, thank you. And if anyone, I'm going to reach out based on the participant list to see if anyone has interest in helping us out with that rubric. But if you have immediate interest, if you could just leave that as a note at the end of the survey, that would be really, really helpful.
And having said that, Ellen prepared a little evaluation. As you know, we're NSF supported. So getting feedback on how valuable you found this session is really important. This is really the first one we've done on the wizard. So we'd love to know, if it was helpful to you, if not, what we can do better, those kinds of things. Very interested in hearing that feedback, and any general feedback you have on the rubric, on the BI wizard, I would be particularly interested in seeing. So I hope you got something out of today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I certainly did. Sharing, it's been a labor of love for me working on the wizard, and sort of having an opportunity to put all of our best ideas in one place for everybody to access and share, and hopefully put their own ideas in there too. So feedback is wonderful. Any other final closing thoughts from the rest of the training team, or Susan, or anybody? Ellen? All right, well, it was great to see you all. I recognize a lot of faces, so thank you for coming and supporting us.